Throughout history, some of the world's most brilliant minds, daring explorers, and even beloved celebrities have vanished without a trace. No goodbye, no explanation, only silence. Their sudden disappearances left families devastated, authorities baffled, and the rest of us haunted by a single question: what really happened to them? These aren't stories from novels or movies. These are real lives, real people who stepped into the unknown and were never seen again. Pilots vanishing mid-flight, leaders swallowed by conspiracy, artists fading from the spotlight as if they were never there at all. Each case leaves behind a trail of clues, rumors, and endless speculation, but no answers. And that's why these mysteries continue to grip us, because the truth might still be out there, waiting to be uncovered. Tonight, we dive into the chilling world of the famous who disappeared, stories that will make you question just how much we really know about the world around us. So, stay with me, because what you're about to hear will keep you thinking long after the video ends. Let's begin where the clouds swallow the sky and the ocean stretches endlessly, with one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. Amelia Earhart. It was July 1937. The world was listening, watching, holding its breath as Amelia Earhart, one of the most daring pilots of all time, set out to accomplish what no woman had ever done: fly around the entire globe. Her name had already become legend, her face splashed across newspapers, her fearless smile inspiring millions. She wasn't just a pilot, she was an icon of freedom, courage, and possibility. But then, somewhere over the vast, unforgiving Pacific, her voice faded from the radio. A final transmission, scratchy, broken. And then, silence. The U.S. Navy launched one of the largest search operations in history. They scoured islands, tracked waves, analyzed every last word she had spoken into that headset. Yet, no wreckage, no parachute, no trace of Amelia or her navigator, Fred Noonan. The ocean swallowed them whole. Or did it? Whispers began almost immediately. Some say her plane went down in the water, sinking to depths that no diver could reach. Others insist she crash-landed on a deserted island, left to survive as a castaway. Her final days spent staring out at a horizon that never brought rescue. And then, there are the darker rumors that she was captured by enemy forces, her fate hidden in classified documents that never reached the light of day. Decades later, fragments of evidence would surface. A piece of aluminum, human bones found on a remote atoll. But none of it could silence the question that still lingers today: what really happened to Amelia Earhart? And as that question remains, it draws us into the next disappearance. A case that doesn't just end in silence, but in whispers of conspiracy and crime. Jimmy Hoffa. Fast forward nearly 40 years. Detroit, July 30th, 1975. A man in a dark suit waits outside a restaurant, nervously checking his watch. That man is Jimmy Hoffa, the most powerful labor union leader America had ever seen. He controlled jobs, money, and influence, and he had enemies. Many of them. That afternoon, Hoffa was scheduled to meet with two mafia figures to discuss his future. He stepped into the restaurant parking lot, and from that moment forward, the world never saw him again. No body, no car, no trace. Just gone. Theories bloomed like wildfire. Some claimed the mob silenced him permanently, fearing his attempts to reclaim control of the Teamsters Union. Others said the government had a hand in his disappearance, erasing a man who knew too much. There are even wild stories of his remains being buried beneath a football stadium, encased in concrete, resting under the turf where players once ran and fans once cheered. Every few years, the FBI digs up a new site, hoping this time they'll find him. But they never do. Nearly half a century later, Jimmy Hoffa's fate is one of America's darkest unsolved mysteries. And yet, compared to what came next, Hoffa's story almost feels straightforward. Because our next disappearance plunges us into the shadows of war, where heroes vanished in the fog of history, never to return. Raoul Wallenberg, 1945. The Second World War was ending, and the world was trying to catch its breath. In Hungary, amidst chaos and fear, a Swedish diplomat named Raoul Wallenberg was saving lives, thousands of them. He issued protective passports, sheltered Jewish families, and stood against the Nazi regime with a bravery that seemed almost superhuman. But when Soviet troops entered Hungary, Wallenberg's story took a chilling turn. He was summoned for a meeting, and from that day forward, he was never seen in public again. The Soviets claimed he died in prison of a heart attack. Others whispered he was executed, silenced for political reasons. And then, stranger rumors emerged that he lived on, hidden in remote prisons, his identity erased, his voice silenced behind cold stone walls. For decades, his family fought for answers, writing letters, pleading with governments. But Wallenberg's fate remains one of the Cold War's most haunting mysteries. A hero who saved thousands, lost, with no grave, no closure. And as we leave behind the fog of war, our next case takes us to a stormy night in 1971, when a man boarded a plane with nothing but a briefcase, a plan, and a name that wasn't even his real one. D.B. Cooper. Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. Portland, Oregon. A man in his mid-40s, wearing a suit and tie, quietly boards a Northwest Orient flight. He gives his name simply as Dan Cooper. He orders a drink, lights a cigarette, and then slips the flight attendant a note. The note wasn't a love letter. It was a threat. He claimed his briefcase held a bomb. His demand? $200,000 in cash and parachutes. The FBI complied. The plane landed in Seattle, the passengers released, and then Cooper gave his instructions. The aircraft was to take off again, low altitude, slow speed. Somewhere over the forests of Washington, in the black of night, he strapped on a parachute, clutched the ransom money, and jumped into the storm, into legend. What happened after that? No one knows. Despite decades of searching, no body was ever found. A few bundles of cash, rotting in a riverbank, surfaced years later. But Cooper himself? He vanished into thin air. Did he die in the fall, his body lost to the wilderness? Or did he survive, living the rest of his life in secret, chuckling every time the mystery made headlines? D.B. Cooper's identity remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in U.S. history. And if you think that story's chilling, wait until you hear the next one. Because not all disappearances belong to leaders or legends. Some involve those who grew up in the spotlight, only to vanish when the world least expected it. Ilenia Carisi. New Orleans, January 1994. The air was heavy with jazz, neon lights flickered in the French Quarter, and tourists spilled into the streets for another night of music and life. Among them was a young woman named Ilenia Carisi, the daughter of Italian music legends Albano Carisi and Romina Power. Ilenia wasn't just the daughter of stars. She was bright, beautiful, and adventurous, with a restless spirit that drew her far from her glamorous upbringing in Italy to the raw, unpredictable rhythms of Louisiana. She was 23 years old, curious about the world, and determined to live life on her own terms. But on the night of January 6th, she walked away from her hotel and never returned. Witnesses claimed they saw her near the Mississippi River, talking with a street musician. Another said she muttered something about belonging to the water. And then, she was gone. Theories swirled like the river itself. Some believe she slipped and drowned, her body carried away by the current. Others suggest she was abducted, lured by someone she trusted. And then, there are those who insist she chose to vanish, reinventing herself somewhere far away, free from fame, free from family expectations. Her mother, Romina, refused to believe her daughter was dead. For years, she held onto hope, lighting candles, praying for her return. Her father, Albano, eventually conceded to the courts, declaring Ilenia legally dead in 2014. But the river never gave up her body. The truth of what happened that night in New Orleans remains as murky as the waters that swallowed her. And just as Ilenia disappeared in the prime of her life, so did another figure. An American businessman whose name became synonymous with mystery, silk, and a disappearance in the jungle that still baffles investigators to this day. Jim Thompson, Cameron Highlands, Malaysia, March 1967. The lush green hills swayed under a heavy mist, and winding paths disappeared into the thick jungle. It was here that Jim Thompson, known worldwide as the Thai Silk King, decided to take a quiet afternoon walk. Thompson wasn't just any expatriate living abroad. He was a decorated American intelligence officer during World War II, and afterward, he single-handedly revived Thailand's silk industry, transforming it into an international sensation. His name was wealth, power, and influence. But on that March afternoon, as the sun slipped behind the trees, Jim Thompson stepped out of the house where he was staying and simply never came back. Locals searched. Police combed the hills. Hundreds of volunteers scoured the jungle. But the trail went cold almost immediately. No footprints, no clothing, not even a torn thread of silk to mark where he had gone. And so the theories began. Some say he was murdered, his success and mysterious wartime connections making him dangerous to powerful people. Others claim he was kidnapped, perhaps by communist insurgents who saw value in the Americans' knowledge. More fantastical stories paint him as a man who staged his own disappearance, walking away from his empire to live a hidden life, far from the demands of fame and fortune. Years later, bones were found in the jungle. Hopes rose, but forensic tests proved they weren't his. Jim Thompson's fate remained sealed in silence. And so the hills of Malaysia hold their secret. Did the jungle consume him? Or did something far more sinister happen that day? What makes his story even more chilling is how it echoes another disappearance. This time, not of a businessman, but of a genius. A mind so brilliant, so ahead of his time, that even his vanishing has become legend. Ettore Majorana, 1938. Europe stood on the edge of war, and science was unlocking secrets that could change the world forever. At the forefront was Ettore Majorana, a young Italian physicist hailed as a prodigy so brilliant that his mentor, Enrico Fermi, once said he was a genius equal to Newton. But then, at only 31 years old, Majorana walked out of his hotel in Naples and vanished. He left behind a trail of confusing letters, some suggesting he intended to take his own life, others hinting he was embarking on a new journey. And that was the last the world ever heard of him. What happened to Ettore Majorana? Some say he threw himself into the sea, his genius too heavy a burden to carry. Others whisper he fled to South America, living under a new identity. There are even theories that he cloistered himself in a monastery, hiding from the world while it descended into war. But here's what makes his disappearance even more haunting. Majorana's research was tied to theories of atomic energy, ideas that would later become central to nuclear weapons. Did he vanish because he feared what his work might unleash? Did he deliberately erase himself, leaving the world without answers to questions that might destroy it? For decades, rumors persisted of sightings an older man, reclusive, with piercing eyes, living in Argentina, or wandering through Italy under a false name. None of them were ever proven. A genius walked into history, and then out of it. And perhaps that's where he still waits, between the lines of equations, between the whispers of conspiracy, forever unsolved. But not all mysteries belong to the past. Some are unfolding even now, caught on camera, leaving us with images burned into our minds of the very moment someone stepped away and never came back. Comment on which tragic deaths of famous people we should investigate next, and feel free to subscribe to support us.